Okay, so now we need to look at this idea of both neuronal pools as well as neural circuits. Okay, so basically, hopefully you've realized now that as human beings we have tons of sensations coming in all the time, directing really complex responses. And so we have to send this information to many different locations. We have to coordinate these motor commands together so we're not tripping over our own feet all the time. And so the way we do that is we have this thing called neuronal pools, which are groups of neurons, okay, and they're grouped together and they work in a coordinated manner. And they do so by creating what is called neural circuits. And you could almost, if you have any sort of electrical background, you could almost think of this as some sort of electrical board with signals going to different places. If you don't have that background, that's fine. This is what we're talking about, okay? So these are examples of different types of pools and circuits. And so what you can see is a signal may come in here, and then all of a sudden we split, okay? And here we've got one presynaptic neuron, but we're sending a signal to actually two postsynaptic neurons, okay? Convergence is going to be the opposite. We have many presynaptic neurons, and they all converge onto one postsynaptic neuron. Serial processing is just going directly from one neuron to the next. Parallel processing is first we start with divergence, and then all of these signals go in parallel. And finally, reverberation, we've got one presynaptic, it hits a postsynaptic, and this postsynaptic both sends that signal on and also sends it back up to the presynaptic neuron. So when are these sorts of things used? Well, divergence, one example could be that, say you have a sensation coming in, so say you touch a hot stove. Well, you want to do several things with that information. Okay, one, you want to send some of that information to the muscles of your arm so it pulls back your hand from the hot stove. You may also want to send some of that information up to your brain areas for conscious perception, so you can say to yourself, oh my goodness, that was hot. And then you can learn to not touch the stove when it's hot again. You could even have further divergence. It doesn't have to be just two postsynaptic neurons. You could even send that same information, to the muscles of my mouth to yell, ow, okay? So this allows one sensation, an example, there's many examples, but one example is that you could have one sensation coming in and it's splitting to cause multiple different responses. Okay, convergence, an example of that. We might think of this as maybe a motor neuron that's controlling the movement of a muscle. And if you remember, there's many areas of the brain that control muscle movement. So there's the primary cortex that initiates the movement. There's the cerebellum that adjusts it based on where you are in space. Are you standing up? Are you laying down? Where's gravity? You can adjust it with the basal nuclei and the substantia nigra. So this you could think of as maybe several different areas of the brain all working together to adjust a final outcome. Okay. Now serial processing, we know sensations come in and they stop off at the thalamus. So this could be the place of the thalamus where it stops off. And then we know some sensations get sent on to the primary somatosensory cortex. So that could be an example of serial processing. Again, parallel processing, we start with divergence, and then we have all of these things running in parallel. So this could also be our example of, you know, pulling back our arm, yelling ouch, thinking, hey, the stove is hot, let me not touch that again. An example of reverberation, if you think about it, as soon as you exhale, your body in normal circumstances then triggers another inhale. So this is something that's triggered automatically. You can choose to control it, but if you choose not to control it, it's something that just constantly repeats in a cycle. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And so that would be the reverberation, okay? It triggers the inhale, but immediately it's also going to trigger the next cycle, okay? So those are just some examples. There are other examples, but those are just some examples of the different ways that you could use these 5 different circuits. If you look in your notes packet, it gives you these circuits, and so I would suggest you listen to what we just talked about again, put a description of the circuit in your own words, referencing, for example, divergence is one presynaptic neuron delivers signal to more than one postsynaptic neuron. Okay, and then think about the examples we talked about. So go through that and see if you can write this out in your own words based on what we've talked about.